Have you ever started a painting and the longer you went, the worse it got? We have a lot of considerations. We have color mixing. We have lights and darks. We have drawing. So today I'm going to share with you one of my favorite tools that you can use to help you excel in your drawing with a paintbrush. It's a tool that the old masters used. They did it often as studies, but they turned into some pretty great works of art in their own right. So if that sounds good to you, stay tuned and we will talk more about the monochrome. As we get going, we're going to grab our color. Now, usually I have several colors to show you, but since today is a monochrome, we're going to choose just one, and that's going to be burnt umber. That is a color that I love. It reminds me of a lot of the sepia toned colored pictures that you see that the old masters have done, so that kind of rings my chime. So that's what another thing, a little important thing when you're doing your monochrome, pick a color you love. You could use blue and white, black and white, whatever tugs at your heart, because then it's just that's gonna show. Your enjoyment of that color is just gonna show in your finished product. So I'll show you my subject. We will wipe down our canvas and we'll get going on this thing. This is my subject. It's a beautiful little scallop bowl I found at an antique store in Indiana with Johnny. And this table, oh my gosh, I love this table. It's from my good friend Nancy, by way of my good friend Renee, her daughter. So I've got one light on my subject, and I want that light to match in color, warmth or coolness, and intensity with the light on my canvas. So that's what I've got right here. I've got my light over my canvas. I put it on a canvas that I can lift up a little more. Put it on an easel that I can lift up a little more. The other paintings I've done is an easel that kind of sits on the ground, but I didn't want to have to hunker down all day. So then I just put a couple glass palettes on my table to keep it clean from getting stained. And here's that burnt sienna color and white, and that's what we're going to be working with today. Always have a towel to regulate the wetness of my brush when I dip it into my turp, which I've got right here. Got some towels handy. I use a ton of paper towels. In the brushes, we've got a coarse blender brush for softening things, a large flat brush for the larger passages, a small flat brush for the smaller passages, and we've got our round brushes, a large and a small. The large I use for drawing, the small I use for teeny tiny spots. Don't really use it a lot. And my palette knife to help me mix my colors, because when you're going and painting, you don't want to just throw your brush into that big gob. It helps you to maintain control if you flatten it out like that. So that's what that's for. So the first thing we want to do is to wet down our canvas. So I'm grabbing a paper towel, dipping it in the turp a little bit to get it kind of wet, and then we're going to wipe down our canvas. That just helps if we have to do any erasing. It's more easy to erase if your surface is already wet, because paint is really very staining, and so it's hard to remove things if the canvas is wet. So we wet it down, and that'll help us as we go. It'll dry, but I find that it's helpful, especially in the drawing stage when I might want to change things. And I'm just using my blender brush to get rid of any lint that has come along with the paper towel. Alright, so let's get started. So I'm going to use my my large round brush to get my drawing going. I'm dipping it in the turp, and then I'm going to come over here to that flattened area on my canvas, on my palette, and just get a kind of an inky consistency is what we're looking for. We want to be able to see through the paint. We don't want coverage right now, we just want sketching qualities. So I just want to think about, this isn't a big, I'm using my hands to block off what I'm looking at. I do this to look at my subject to help me see what I'm wanting to capture on my canvas. Okay, so I think I want this to fill, I want to off center over here a little bit. Don't want it to come any higher than this. No lower than this. I'd like it, the top to be closer to the top of the canvas than the bottom is. That creates more variety. If everything's the same, which you can use that to your advantage, but until you know how to use it to your advantage, it might be good just to use some variety. So, sounds like Bear's in there playing. It's really hard to find a time to film when he's not ready to play. So, now I'm looking at the total height of my, using my brush handle to measure the top of the bowl to where it meets the stem, the neck, and then the neck to the bottom. So I'm measuring the foot to the neck, and I have that measurement here. It looks like nothing to you, but when I use it on the bowl, then this is the distance from where I'm sitting, from the bottom of the sugar bowl to the neck or the candy bowl. And then I'll use this measurement to see how many times higher it is. So I've got that, and it's 1, 2.5. So this is approximately from the neck to the bottom of the candy bowl. So 1, 2.5. That'll work. I kind of guessed right, luckily. And then how wide is the hole, is the widest part of the bowl in relation to the height of it. And when I measure the width of it with my brush handle, and then I turn that and measure it to the top, it's, when I look at it, it's a little taller than it's a little wider than it is tall. So when I measure it over there, I get this. This is the width of it. So I think I want to scoot it over a little bit. So we'll move him over. As Helen Van Wyck said, a painting is a record of a series of corrections. So it's to be expected to have to make changes. Okay, now we'll start sketching it in a little bit here. This kind of comes down here. This will be the lowest point, so everything from here will go up. So I'm just going to draw a simple shape right now to find my way. And then as we get closer in with details, I'll start to explain that ruffled edge that we have. So this will be the highest point, and the ellipse. As we talked in our bowl painting with the clementines, an ellipse is not a plain oval. It is a shape that's being seen in perspective, so we wouldn't divide our ellipse in half. We know from the illustration of the rubber band on the mouth of the bowl that when you have it on the mouth, it looks symmetrical, but as you tilt it back, this back half gets smaller than the front half. So we're not mathematicians, we're not engineers or architects, but those concepts help us find our way. So this is the front of the ellipse, this is the back, and this is the middle. Just so my mind knows where to put everything. I don't want a square shape, so I'm going to erase these sides so they don't confuse me. So I'm just drawing a basic ellipse right now. And then we will make it ruffly in a little bit. All these things guide us, and then we have to rely on our eye to help us refine it and capture that likeness. Even a sugar bowl has a likeness. And we don't, the likeness is our guide. It doesn't have to be our dictator. Sometimes nailing it right on down to the very thing is the hardest thing to do. I think that's a pretty safe thing to say. Okay, this kind of kicks out here, starts up here. Okay, and then there's like a wooden, really pretty carved wooden spoon for the candy or the sugar, and he's laying at an angle. And he has a cast shadow that falls away. And it's ruffly too, so the spoon stops short, it overlaps the cast shadow, and it stops short before the shadow ends here. Okay. And then we don't really have a table line, the table goes up. So now that we have our basic shape, it doesn't look like the bowl yet, but we're sneaking up on it. And that's a lot of paintings, being sneaky. So we've got our basic shape. So now we're going to start to think more about the details, like the ruffles and things. So we'll start building upon what we have. Okay, so I want to think about how many ruffles we have here. So we've got one here, dips down. Here. Okay, so we got another one here. Getting those ruffles organized, and as they go toward the edge, they're going to get closer together. The ones out here right in front of us are going to be broader, like on our pumpkin, and as we work toward the edges, they're going to get closer together, just because of the trick of the eye and looking at it in perspective. So we need to make this ruffle here, and it rolls into another over here. The tallest ones will be the ones here in back. And we'll push and pull the shape when we start painting the bowl, and then start painting the background. We'll clean each other up. We'll use each one to refine the shape. A little too high. This needs to start coming down more. A little more paint. If you see any little anomalies with what you're doing, go ahead and fix it now. I mean, there's loads of anomalies. It's not perfect, but if you really notice something like this, I noticed the body of the bowl needed to be longer, so I went ahead and extended it now instead of waiting till later. And some things can be suggested, like these edges here. We'll probably state them pretty clearly, but sometimes it's all right in the painting to just kind of let the eye of the viewer kind of fill in the gaps, to put your energy more on the subject itself. So I'm going to rinse out my brush. And I think we'll start painting the bowl itself, and then we'll adjust the background. Usually I do the background first, but I think we'll adjust the background as we go. So now we're gonna start the fun part. We're done drawing, refining our drawing. We're going to start laying in our lights and darks and start building this thing and making it look more three-dimensional. Okay, so I'm mixing. I don't want this burnt sienna completely dark, so I'm going to start mixing in a little bit of white with it. This whole space in between is going to be our thinking place for the rest of this painting. So I'm squinting to see. This is kind of a medium tone. I need more terp in my brush. because, you know, usually I work from the back front, but Richard Schmid, oh my gosh, one of my favorite American painters, he says just start at the focal point, get that exactly how you want it, and then build everything out from there. So that's another good way to do it. Of course, if he said so, it's a good way. You can bet money on it. His book, Alla Prima, is one of the best books on painting I've ever read. I will link it in the description below. So right now we're just laying in a basic color, basic medium color, and even all these ruffles get some lights and darks to make them stand out. So it might have behooved me to pick a simpler subject, but I thought this was really charming, and we're gonna have a lot of paintings together over time, hopefully. And so I thought, why not just pick something that I find charming, because it'll be more fun to paint. If you have any questions, anything you'd like to see me paint or help explain how I paint, let me know in the comments below. So I'm adding a little more light here to the light side. The light is striking these shapes. Each shape gets its own little light side and dark side. So I'm going to add a little more light here. So I'm going to add, I can see the dark behind is influencing that area quite a bit. So I want to get some darks going in here. Round, bear, no. He is full of play today, aren't you, baby doll? I know, not right now, babe. I think he gets bored while I'm working and he finds mischief to get into. Kind of always a push me pull you situation with painting. You do one thing and then you see how it looks in relation to the other things. Like that guy, either that guy's too high or that guy's too low. I haven't decided. I think he might be too high. Yeah, I think that's better. So yeah, you do it, you think about it, you do it, then you adjust it. So large flat brush, and we'll start doing a little more with that background. Sometimes it helps to move to a different part of the painting, and then your eyes are fresher looking at what you've already done. Just as I was doing my background, my painting was hopping around, so my grandpa and I made these. They're just homemade clips, two with a wing nut, a screw with a ring nut, and 2 pieces of wood that you can use to, I unscrew it, I attach it to one leg of my easel, then I hold it down tight, and then I tighten the screw. That keeps my canvas from bouncing while I'm working on it. It helps hang on to it. So. And I like to use a crisscross stroke when I'm doing my background. Because if you paint the whole thing like this, if that's the effect you want, you go for it. But I have a lot of new students, me included. You're not quite sure how to use your brush. You're juggling a lot anyway. So this helps. Instead of having a background like that, I try to save brush strokes like that for the table when I want to describe what it is. But for the background, I just like to use crisscross. Again, you know, the old masters did such amazing things, and I think they're the standard bearers for everything, a lot of things, if not everything. So I think it's if they did it, that's good enough for me, right? Kind of mask in this background and get rid of that white canvas. And see, that clip is a lifesaver. If I was over here pushing on this side, this would be popping off. So homemade clip, can't beat it. Some easels have a clip, and you know, added, built-in kind of thing. But so right now I'm not worried with how dark the background is too much. I want it for sure darker than my bowl, so I think we'll go ahead and let this be darker to where the light looks like it's passing toward the front. If we make the, you know, it's all about contrast and using that contrast to our advantage. If we keep our background dark, then it will push forward our subject because it's light. So go ahead and cover the canvas here. And with a monochrome, it's a good way to train your eye to see the differences in the tonalities, the lights and darks. So as I look, I can see the background gets lighter right before the cast shadow falls across it. So we'll just prepare the area since we got our big brush anyway. We'll do the same over here. A little bit of lint. You can pick a lot up with your brush if you go at it like this. Just scoop it up, wipe it off. You get a hair, brush hair on there, that works. Go ahead and brush into your subject. Don't just come up here and go around it. I mean, sometimes you can get away with that, but sometimes your brush strokes tell on you that you did that, you snuck it in. So go ahead and do your brush work like you would do if the subject wasn't there. If you're able, if you've already done your subject really nicely and you don't want to mess it up, just try to carve it in best you can. Usually if you overlap a little bit into your subject, you can do a little repair and it'll make it look right. Okay. I'm going to soften this outer edge a little bit. Okay. All right, we'll go back to our flat square brush. Let's see what we want to do. So now that we have a background, I can see how light this looks, which is great. But I want to add some shadows where these ruffles have their own little body shadow and clean up the space a little bit. Because a bowl is going to be lighter over here, so our light's coming from this side and our painting and striking here. So things on this side are going to have more shadow happening. There, we're starting to get a little more feel. Starting to look a little better here. That's what's so much fun about the monochrome. You don't have to worry as much about the balance of color. Well, you don't have to worry at all about color mixing and balance. You're just looking at lights and darks and what looks correct. And sometimes you'll get a little spot on your painting where the brushwork's kind of dandy and maybe it doesn't look exactly like the subject, but nobody's going to see the subject. They're just going to see your painting. So do what you need to do. Or if you see a little delightful spot, just leave it. Just let it be. Let it sing. A light spot here. The edge is light. The edge comes up here. It's quite dark. The back side of it's quite dark because it's in shadow. Now we want this ruffle here in front to stand out from what's behind it. So we're going to add more white. I'm going to add darks here to make the white stand out. It's not standing out because of the white canvas, and we can help shape this ruffle as we do it. Let's just go ahead and add this shadow underneath all the ruffles. We can modify it. This will help us get our bearing. This ruffle style is how I like to do my pie crust edges too. So it makes me think of that. So you come over here, it kind of blends into what's behind it a little more. There's more contrast here. Over here, everything's a little more similar. Okay, so I need just to keep building up these over here. It gets a little lighter here. Little cross hatching just to make it blend. So these are all running together, so we need to separate them out a little. So I'm going to use a little bit of the shadow color here to just pull them out a little bit, just the back ends of their ruffles. Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and build in this shape here. Need more light. This needs to connect here better. Getting some dark to trim off this shape a little bit. All right, so I'm going to wet my brush and start filling in the body of this bowl a little more. So we've got our 5 tone values happening here. This slides up in here a little bit. So we've got body tone, body shadow, and then there's a reflection. So and as it rolls under, it gets a little darker. So let's clean up this a little bit. See, as he's growing, his body has moved over a little, so we'll have to adjust his foot to match. That's okay. Paintings grow and change. Sometimes they do, so enough you got to start over, but I think we'll be okay. Just adding some more light to the light side. All right, so I think I'm gonna get I feel like I need to get away from it a little bit. Sometimes when you're sitting right with it, it's hard to see the illusion you're creating because your brain is just like paint. I'm putting paint on a canvas. You need to get away, let your brain forget the process and let it see the magic. Let it see what you've actually accomplished. So I'm gonna step away a minute, come back and see if those ruffles are landing right where I want, because now's the time. I don't want to do everything else and come back and maybe they're not quite right. And sometimes I say, work on something else, refresh your eye, return to it. But this is a critical point of the painting, the ellipse. If I don't get this ellipse right and the ruffles right, this is not much point in continuing. So I'm going to step away, take a break, come back, take a look at the ellipse with the ruffles, and then we'll continue to cover that canvas.
Saiba que isto em mim provoca em mim